Imagine for a moment that you feel like you're being watched. You notice a set of footprints in the snow leading from the edge of the woods directly to your back door, but there are no footprints leading back out. You check the locks, you search the rooms, you find nothing. You tell yourself it's just the wind or the isolation of the farm playing tricks on your mind, but you aren't alone. Someone is in the walls, someone is in the attic, and they are waiting for the sun to go down. Today we go back to March 1922 to a small remote farmstead in Bavaria, Germany. This is the story of Hinterkaifeck, a case so brutal, so baffling, and so deeply personal that it remains the ultimate dark masterclass in the unsolved. Hinterkaifeck wasn't a village. It was a lonely farmstead, tucked away 40 miles north of Munich. It was inhabited by the Gruber family, the elderly Andreas and Cecilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, her two children, Cecilia and Joseph, and their new maid Maria. The Grubers weren't well liked. Andreas was a cold, hard man, rumored to be abusive and deeply unpopular in town. But in late March, something shifted from unpleasant to paranormal. Andreas began telling neighbors about strange occurrences. He found a newspaper on his porch he hadn't subscribed to. He heard footsteps in the attic. He found his keys missing. And then there were those footprints, leading from the forest through the thick Bavarian snow, ending right at his window. He searched the barn, the house, and the tool sheds. No one was there. He didn't know that the predator had already moved in. On the night of March 31st, the silence of the farm was broken. Before the event took place, someone arrived at the venue at the worst time. As the sun began to dip behind the Bavarian pines, a woman named Maria Baumgartner arrived at the gates of Hinterkaifeck. She was 44 years old, a sister, a daughter, and, as of that afternoon, the new maid. She was stepping into a role that no one else wanted. The previous maid had quit 6 months earlier, fleeing the farm in a state of nervous collapse. Her reason? She claimed the house was haunted. She heard voices. She felt eyes on her from the dark corners of the attic. Maria didn't believe in ghosts. She needed the work. But as she unpacked her small bag in the room provided for her, she had no way of knowing that she was the final piece of a predator's puzzle. She had been on the property for less than 5 hours. She hadn't even finished her first turn of the house. Somewhere in the shadows above her, the ghost the previous maid feared was shifting in the rafters, watching her through a hole in the ceiling. Maria Baumgartner would never draw her first paycheck. She wouldn't even live to see her first sunrise at Hinterkaifeck. She had walked into a tomb, and the door was already locked from the inside. That night, as the family settled down for dinner, the predator struck. On the night of March 31st, the silence of the farm was broken. We don't know the exact order of events, but investigators believe that one by one, 4 members of the family were lured into the barn. Perhaps a noise drew them out. Perhaps the cattle were acting up. One by one, Andreas, then his wife, then Victoria, and then the young 7-year-old Cecilia stepped into the dark stable. They were met with a mattock, a heavy pickaxe-like garden tool. The killer was precise. The strikes were devastating. But the horror didn't end in the barn. The killer then walked into the house. He found the maid Maria in her bedroom. It was her first day on the job. She never saw the second day. Finally, the killer approached the crib of 2-year-old Joseph. Even the infant was not spared. The family was dead on Friday night, but the bodies weren't discovered until Tuesday. This is where the story turns from a crime to a nightmare. For 3 days, smoke was seen rising from the chimney. Neighbors saw the cattle being fed. The bread in the kitchen had been eaten. Someone had made themselves at home. The killer had lived in the house with the 6 corpses, sleeping in their beds, eating their food, and tending to their farm animals, while the family lay in a bloody heap in the barn just a few yards away. When the neighbors finally entered, they found the youngest child, Cecilia, had survived the initial blow. In her final moments of life, she had remained in the barn for hours, tearing out tufts of her own hair in shock and pain before finally succumbing to the cold hands of death. The police were baffled. Over 100 suspects were questioned. Was it a jilted lover of Victoria? Was it a neighbor seeking revenge? Some even whispered it was the ghost of Victoria's husband, supposedly killed in World War I, returning to claim his family. But none of the theories fit. No money was stolen. The killer wasn't there for gold. They were there for them. The skulls of the victims were sent to Munich to be examined by clairvoyants, a sign of how desperate the police had become. But the heads were lost during the chaos of World War II. To this day, the victims of Hinterkaifeck are buried in a headless grave. Who stays in a house with the people they just murdered? Who feeds the cows of a family they just extinguished? The killer of Hinterkaifeck wasn't just a murderer. They were a shadow that became a resident. They walked back into the woods the same way they came, leaving no name, no motive, and a mystery that has frozen the blood of investigators for over a century. Even today, the locals of Kaifeck refuse to talk about the farm, and the original house was torn down to erase the memory. But the feeling remains. Next time you hear a creak in your attic, don't just assume it's the house settling, because at Hinterkaifeck, the house was settled by someone else. If you found this dive into the dark corners of history intriguing, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. We have many more shadows to uncover. Until next time, keep your doors locked.